Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. And we're here with Huck TV. He's going to be bringing us the show. Wants a belly rub now. Sorry Huck, we got to get to business. But in the meantime, I got to tell you that this effort is going to be about something that you're going to get fond of, trust me, if you're not already. And that's The Hunt for Skinwalker, the book that started it all at Skinwalker Ranch. This is episode 2. Now, I've already previewed the second book. I'm kind of going in reverse order, but sorry. The first book was really good, by the way. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The second one, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The first book is really what got me wrapped up in the whole topic because it was so intriguing. That's why I'm doing the review, and we're off to our second review. So just to remind everybody, it's a 400-acre ranch, and it's in the far northeast corner of Utah. Let's go into a little bit of the background of the property this time. So, Mr. Bigelow bought the ranch from some people that we'll call the Gormans. When the Gormans bought the ranch, there was a clause in the deed, and it said, no digging unless you tell the prior owners. No digging on the ranch? It's a ranch. You dig post holes, you dig pools for the cows to have water. No digging? Well, let me ask you, friends, if there was a clause that said no digging, and you were a research team, almost one of the first things I'd do, dig. But there was that clause. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would there be a clause there, no digging? Well, on the purest side of the coin, you'd think, well, maybe he has some relatives buried there. Maybe he has some animals that he loved buried there. I don't know. Now, on the realistic side of the coin, maybe he knows that if you dig there, it's going to stir up some things that aren't good. I don't know. But that clause is peculiar because it was passed on to Mr. Bigelow. Now, the previous owners to the Gormans bought it in the 50s. And when the Gormans came onto the property, they found something pretty unusual. They found huge bolts with huge locks on all the windows and doors, and a couple of big metal rings on different sides of the homes where you'd tie up big dogs to like protect the property. So I don't know, if you came onto a property like that, the first thing I'd think of is there some kind of crime occurring here that wasn't disclosed? And here's a little something for you folks. When you're looking at real estate and you see a neighborhood that has a lot of bars on the windows, there's usually a reason for that. And you can call your local police and sheriff and ask them what the crime rate is in that area. Now, I would actually think the crime rate in the Uinta Basin is pretty small. But when the Bigelows were doing their due diligence, they found that there were a lot of UFO sightings in this basin that went back decades and decades. Yeah, they all heard you, Huck. I know you want to play. Well, there was a book on the basin that categorized 400 sightings there over a term, but in chronological order. In 1776, there was a father named Escalante who supposedly saw a strange fireball in the sky above his camp there. In the 1960s, a large black triangle was hovering above the basin when a Native American shot at it and said he heard the bullet ping off the metal of the craft. Now, one of the questions that was asked of the author is, why would there be UFOs in this basin? And he said there could be a number of reasons. It could be that because it's a highly religious community, even higher than most, and that the vast majority were Mormons. But there was also another reason that he stated, which I find very intriguing. Is this person said that the valley has some of the highest levels of gilsonite anywhere in the world. Dave, what's gilsonite? Great question. Gilsonite, according to many, this is what one source says, non-hazardous, non-toxic, very pure resinous rock formed of a complete combination of different kinds of hydrocarbons. The unique natural combination rich in nitrogen and beta-carotenes, low in sulfur is what makes gilsonite so special. Its unique chemical and physical properties makes gilsonite a high-performance, multi-purpose additive that is also a cost-effective solution. Well, Dave, that was nice. What did you just say? Let's go in 6th grade terms. The mineral known as gilsonite, or asphaltum, A-S-P-H-A-L-T-U-M, was discovered in the early 1860s, but it was not until the mid-1880s that Samuel H. Gilson began to promote it as a waterproof coating for wooden pilings, as an insulation for wire cable, and as a unique varnish. Okay, thank you. Also, gilsonite is a naturally occurring solid black, lightweight, organic material that originates from the solidification of petroleum. The dull black appearance of weathered gilsonite resembles coal, whereas surface of freshly broken gilsonite is shiny and resembles obsidian. Gilsonite is distinguished by its solubility in organic solvents, low density, and it makes a brown streak when rubbed on paper. Solid hydrocarbons like gilsonite are called asphaltites and are found in oil-bearing sedimentary basins, commonly as veins associated with oil shale. The biggest gilsonite deposits in the world are in the Uinta Basin and Turkey. Now, Dave, why would strange craft be interested in gilsonite? Well, Ollie, that's the million-dollar question. I have no idea. But when an area is so unique that there's only 2 major deposits like it in the world, and there's a high propensity for unusual things going on and unusual things seen on the land, I think that's pretty odd. Worth looking into. So, chronological order. They hear a ping off of this triangle in the 60s. No sound coming from the triangle. So 1960s to 70s, cattle mutilation started in other parts of the world as well. The author counted 12 to 15 mutilation cases in the area in the following 10 years. In 1861, President Lincoln established the Uinta Indian Reservation, and that occupied the majority of the basin. Let's get to some stories about this family and what they experienced. Well, Gorman's wife was named Ellen, and she was returning from her job at the end of a day of a mortgage company. She opened the gate of the property, pulled her car in, got out, closed the gate, got in, and then looked to her left, 30 feet away, stooped out the car window, is what she described as a giant wolf-looking creature. Strangely, this wolf had light blue eyes. She said were almost mesmerizing and calming. And the weird thing about this wolf is the head was way bigger than what it should have been for the body. But the head, when it was standing up, stood up over the top of her car. She said it was huge. And she said that there was a second wolf-like creature back another 20 feet, and that one was almost aloof. It stayed almost out of view, and it was all black. She was scared. This was the second time that she had seen a creature similar to that on the property in the previous 2 weeks. Previous to this, her husband and her had seen a creature just like this back on the pastures. Well, she got upset because she thought somebody in the area was raising these wolves. So she went to the tribal office and she wanted to inquire about raising wolves. And the people said nobody on any tribal land is raising wolves. And in fact, no wolves have been seen on the Ute tribe property in 70 years. Well, that's a pretty important statistic, isn't it? So what did Ellen see? Well, that's the million-dollar question. So in the following days, the husband, Tom, is working out on his property, and he was going to place some new posts. And he asked everybody where the post digger went. Well, both of her sons said they hadn't touched it. He said that he left it on the ground as he started to dig the hole. Left it on the ground. Left for a couple minutes, came back, and it was gone. Said he didn't see anybody out there, didn't hear anybody out there. And he was pretty adamant that somebody in the house was probably screwing with him. Well, the entire family went out to the back area where he was digging. They searched for 30 minutes. They never found anything. 2 evenings later, Tom comes in, asks the family where his pliers are. And this is stranger. He's working on the fence, puts his pliers on top of the post, turns around to get some wire, turns back around, the pliers are gone. Ellen now told him that certain things that he was explaining, certain characteristics of those are happening to her inside the house. A couple nights later, Tom and his 2 boys are out in the backyard, and they see a vehicle with red lights that they describe as looking like an RV. And as they got he said, well, somebody's trespassing, let's go out and check. So they walked out towards it, and it kept moving away. And it kept staying just a little bit in front of them and a little bit in front of them, and they weren't hearing any noise. Then they started to run, and they started to close on it, and they said that this thing lifted up off the ground, went right over a fence, and then went back down again. Tom said his boys were scared. One boy was crying because of all the strangeness going on at the property. It eventually just left. Several nights later, Tom and Ellen like to take walks onto the back portion of the property at sunset and during the evening. Kind of keep an eye on the property and such. They're walking down on the property line, down in the valley, and back on the ridge. They hear something that they describe as metal banging. Boom, boom. Well, they couldn't figure out where it was, but about at the same time, down on their property, they see something that they described as a refrigerator shaped white light. So no defined edges, just a white light shaped about the size of a refrigerator. He said that they walked towards it, and then they could still hear occasionally the bong bong of the metal behind them. Then as they got close to it, this thing lifted off, took off at miraculous speed, and disappeared. They went back to hear the bong bong sound, and it was gone. So let me ask you a question. And this is a predicament that's with many unusual things in our world. The Gormans had no evidence of anything they saw, other than just their representation of what happened. So does that mean you don't believe them? Because if it happened to you, would you really care what anybody thought? I've seen a lot of unusual things in my day. I personally don't care if anybody believes me or not. A lot of times I've had people with me, but other times I haven't. Truthfully, don't care. I know what I saw. And I think the Gormans were getting to that point. That refrigerator light was almost hopscotching away from them until it clearly reacted to the couple and took off. Days later, rumors in the town near them reached the Gormans. And the rumor was that the Utes were saying that their property was cursed by their tribe, and tribal members couldn't go there. When the Gormans pushed for an answer as to why their property was cursed, they could never get a straight answer. Now, they've rarely had two identical things happen to them at the same time. So, let's just pretend for a second you were doing a study on how ants on an anthill react to light, heat, fire, shadows, sound. And every day, you just threw something else at them and saw how they react. Kind of reminds you of the way whatever entity is doing is going at the Gormans. Something different all the time. Nothing blatantly to hurt them. But I was thinking about this last night. I said, that's kind of what it sounds to me. But we'll go on. So one night into the future here, Tom was looking at his property, looking for trespassers, etc., just walking around. And he says, out of nowhere, an aircraft, 30 to 40 feet long, reminded him of a smaller version of the B-2 stealth bomber, was hovering above the property. He said there was no wind, there was no noise, it was 20 feet off the ground, and absolutely motionless. But he said down below the craft were these multicolored lights moving around on the ground. And he says he could see those more easily than he could see the aircraft. It was almost as though the lights on the ground attracted him to the plane. And he said it was a plane for lack of a better reason. But he said it appeared to him as though this craft was scanning the ground below for something. He said it was moving in a distinct pattern covering the ground. It was about 100 yards from him. He said he tried to watch it as long as he could while he was hiding. And then he made a noise, and it's like the plane reacted to him and then moved away at a super high rate of speed. So my question is, why was it scanning the ground? Well, this has been stated before, so I'm not going to make myself to be a genius. Is maybe down below the ground, which they haven't dug yet, is something like a giant transistor, but not a transistor like you and I would think, like a little chip. Maybe not something like that. Maybe it's so sophisticated that they could make that chip out of natural minerals and not actual manufacturing of a plastic board and metal connections. But what if it was just natural ingredients in the ground that they made this out of? And that thing was hovering over it to get a message. Maybe it has some exotic fuel that it's refueling there. Hard to say. But until you start thinking outside the box, we're never going to get the answer. So, weeks later, Tom's gone out of town for the night. Ellen's driving home at about 6 p.m. And as she's pulling into her property, about 20 to 30 feet above her is a black triangle. Remember that? It followed her home to the ranch, flew off over the property, and just disappeared. And then hours later, this is going to sound bizarre, as if nothing else was, she saw what appeared to be an RV on her property on the pasture about 200 yards from her home. Now, obviously, she's got binoculars. But remember, Tom thought he saw an RV too with red lights that eventually flew away. Now, in this instance, Ellen says that a light's on inside this whatever. And inside of it, she can almost see what appears to her to be a desk. She says a figure that looked to be about 7 feet tall comes into the frame, sits down at the desk. She says it appears to be wearing all black clothing, or is all black, and has a visor over the face. She said it turned and stared in her direction. Now, if you're a lady and you're home with a couple young kids and you see this in your backyard, I think that may affect you. Now, she said she called Tom, and Tom drove all night to get there. Well, I'm sorry, folks, but if that was me and I saw something like that on my property, I think I'd call for special forces, the Green Berets. I'd call for everybody. Why didn't she call the sheriff? For sure would have called them, because I'd want witnesses to this. But Tom eventually gets back home. They both walked out to where they saw this RV thing. And they saw huge footprints in the mud, 18 inches long. They described them as not quite footprints, not quite boot prints like we know, but there was a distinct heel and some type of covering over the foot, they thought. But it was at this point they made a decision that they're not letting their boys out at night anymore. Yeah, I don't think I would have. Now, there's an author that I've followed for a long time. His name is Jacques Vallée, one of the best UFO researchers in modern day history. Vallée was on the board of directors of NIDS. Now, in this book, they talked about some history of UFOs causing injury to people. And one of the pieces that they brought up was a piece by Vallée that was in Parnarma, Brazil. And I'm going to show you where this was. This is Caleres Island. So here's Brazil, French Guiana. Kind of get an idea. Right on the coast, right on the water. Around water. So, Vallée goes on. Five people died there after a close encounter with a box-like UFO. It had powerful light beams. Now, in this area of the world, the people are pretty rudimentary. They're hunters and gatherers. They live in thatched huts. Well, they were out hiding in trees, waiting and looking for prey. And these beam of lights found him in the tree, kind of zapped him. The victims reportedly heard a hum that sounded like refrigerators or transformers. And as the vehicle moved away, the hum didn't change in its pitch. Now, they never could describe exactly what the vehicle looked like that had these bright lights on them. But in November of 1977, a physician on Colares Island saw 35 patients that were victims of these lights. Most of them had lesions on their face and on their stomach area that resembled radiation burns. Sometimes their hair would fall out, their skin would turn black, but the victims never reported any pain. It's kind of strange. But when the light hit them, they were immediately immobilized. The beam was about 7 to 8 centimeters in diameter. When they tried to scream, no sound came out. During their investigation, they came to a conclusion that it was a combination of ionizing and non-ionizing radiation, and it was possibly related to high-power pulse microwaves. And the comment Valet made is, if these things were trying to kill people, they were highly ineffective. So what was the point of what they were doing? Were they studying how these affected humans? Were they studying how we reacted to these? Are they still studying us today? Who knows? I'll make this comment. Reports about UFOs causing humans life-threatening injury are very rare in the United States. Very rare. But let's take that a step further. What about possible UFOs injuring animals through animal mutilation? Not so rare anymore. So does that mean if the entities are doing both, mutilating animals and abducting people, do they view us as a higher life source? Is it not even on that level? Is it something entirely different? Yeah, we'd mutilate you if we had to, but we don't have to, but we have to mutilate them. Is that it? That we don't understand? Then the other question, and this is a really tough one. If you believe that aliens, entities, etc. are taking people, and some are brought back and dumped out here, and some aren't brought back. This is a hard one, folks. What if they are mutilating people, but they're smart enough never to put them back because they understand what that'll do to the ire of us for them? Could that be a possibility? How would we as a country react if our government knew about this, allowed this to go on? How would we respond to them having that knowledge and allowing it to go on? Deep questions there. And then the other question is, how much does our government know about these UFOs taking us or taking our animals? How much do they know? I think it's pretty well established our government isn't going to tell us the truth about UFOs. They will only tell us what they'll probably think we'll figure out if they don't admit it. And then, through PSYOPs, they're going to try to get us to think whatever they want us to believe about these UFOs. They're good, they're bad, they're handsome, they're ugly, they're smelly. They'll do us harm, they won't do us harm. They're here for friendship, they're not here for friendship. They're our enemy. What do they want us to believe? Better than that, what's the truth? And how do you find the truth? Tough questions. But the more, this is probably the third or fourth time I've gone through this book. No, I'm serious. I think it's highly well done. Knapp and Kelleher did a stellar job on this book. And there's so many intriguing turns and twists. I first read this the first year I started working on missing people. My view about missing people has changed. My view about this entire issue has migrated on. And each time I've read it, I've had a different epiphany each time. And as I go through it with you and we review the remainder of the book, you'll see what I mean. But in the meantime, I greatly appreciate you being here. Everyone who visits my site will be treated with grace and integrity. And if you don't treat others like that, you're gone. Those are the rules. Those are my rules. So it's okay to disagree, but disagree with class. Have a great week. Do something kind for somebody today. That's the movement for today, please. Paulides out.